Hello. Welcome to the Falling for Learning podcast. I am TD Flinaw. This is episode 77. Today we have a special guest. His name is James Riley, and he is a career educator and he serves as a restorative justice educator. And he's going to get into details about what that means and about consequences and punishments and all that for schools. And what you may think about doing at home if you are a homeschool parent. Let's get into it. Hi, thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. We have this podcast to help parents and caregivers with having the resources, strategies, and tools needed to make sure that their children are on track for learning and to stay on track for success. Hi, how are you doing, Mr. Riley?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. So everyone, this is James Riley. We work together right now, and we're going to talk about, his role in schools and how that fits into like consequences, punishments, and all that. So how is your holidays going so far?
Well, seeing that we're a couple of hours into it, yesterday was Friday. The break is today. So today was, I've been up since 6:30 this morning on the go nonstop. Okay. And I still have one more thing to do before the night is all done. So if I had to put it all in one word, today, the first day of break, it has been very busy, but very gratifying.
All right. Very busy, but very gratifying. Okay. So we like to talk about all kinds of things on this podcast that are related to education, helping kids to fall in love with learning, guiding parents to strategies and tips on how to make that happen. Before we get into that, we also like to talk about like what made you fall in love with learning as a child.
That's a good question. So falling in love with learning as a child, I really don't know what made me fall in love. I just did what was normal as any, childhood or child age person would do, just attend school, try to get the A on the test. I wasn't that successful all the time, but I did, try my best. I listened to my teachers, followed instructions. I was one of those dudes who was just, kind of, walking by the line and just doing what I was supposed to do, because I know that mom and the family wanted me to do well. And so I gave it my all. And it really wasn't until my college days that I really developed a fondness for learning. And, so I would have to say it didn't necessarily begin in my childhood, but somewhere, around young adultish, I guess, is when I kind of picked up and really began to understand what learning could do for someone. So, yeah, I would have to say it didn't begin as in my childhood, but as a young adult.
So you're basically saying you started with just compliance, doing what you were told to do, following the rules, and then later on, it kind of caught on for you. So what were some kind of activities and things like that you were involved in? Because one thing is you weren't turned off from learning. I guess you were still involved, right? So what are some things that you were involved in as a kid that led to your career that you have now or your career in education overall?
Absolutely. So when I, just about, a lot of young boys have dreams of being a professional athlete. So for me, it wasn't, I want to be a cop or I want to be a fireman or a police officer or lawyer. I was like, hey, I want to go to the, I want to go to the NBA, right? But I didn't have the skills, right? So middle school, I played basketball, but I wasn't like the top dude, right? And then even in high school, I went to high school out there in the Valley. Shout out to El Camino Real in the Valley. So I went there and, I loved basketball as a kid. And so when I matriculated to high school, kind of fell in love with track. And, so I found myself in a lot of extracurricular activities where, activities or, moving around was was kind of necessary for me. So just, just being involved in kind of learning about sports and being a sports person and really trying to find my ways like, okay, well, I didn't make the varsity team. So what else could I do to kind of help, facilitate what I'm going to do later on in life? So for me, trying to develop some of those skills, it's like, okay, you're not always going to do what you want to do, but you need to pick up something. You need to be good at something. So one of my favorite activities as a child was photography. And so I remember being in sixth grade, fifth or sixth grade, using, I don't know, I'm dating myself right here. I'm going to date myself.
Go
Okay.
ahead, date yourself. The
So,
wisdom.
yeah. So my grandmother, she was from the South Carolina, and she would always go to like what they would call them rummage sales, or we refer to them as yard sales, right?
Yes,
The kind of academic word for rummage sale, right? So we would go to yard sales, or she would, and then she found a camera for me. So it was an old camera. It was a 120 film kind of camera. So you remember 120? Now this is okay. See, you don't even remember that. So like I said, I'm kind of dating myself. But eventually, I kind of used that camera, and then my grandfather on my father's side, he kind of no, actually, it was my uncle. My uncle had a Canon camera, and I kind of picked it up and was using it when I was hanging out with him. And so eventually, my grandfather bought me my first 35 millimeter camera. It was a Canon AE1, which was a top of the line camera, and so I kind of developed the skill of photography as well. So I knew if I didn't become a basketball player, at least I can do something in the trade centered around photography. So that's kind of where I was. And I kind of carried that love of photography throughout high school. I wasn't on the yearbook staff because most of the time I was participating in a lot of the sporting activities at the school. Either fall would be basketball, spring would be track. So I wasn't a part of a yearbook, but I did take several courses from my teacher, Miss Weaver, Carolyn Weaver, and I still remember her today. She had a wonderful impact on me in terms of using photography and kind of understanding photography and taking it to another level. So shout out to Miss Weaver. So that's kind of what I learned, and then from there, I wanted to be a photojournalist. So you talk about coming out of high school and figuring out what I wanted to do. Well, the most important thing that seniors do when they graduate high school is they go to college. Well, for me, my mom, she didn't necessarily go to college. My dad, she did attend trade school, but my dad, he went straight into the Air Force. So, for them, and then for a lot of, my grandparents, I was the first kid to kind of go to college. So for me, it was a big thing. And so I figured, okay, I didn't go to like Michigan State or UCLA. I just went down the street. I went to El Camino College over in Torrance because I was not ready.
All right.
I wasn't ready. Didn't understand. Didn't really have anyone to kind of tutor me along the process in terms of taking tests. And, it was just, okay, let's graduate high school and then figure out what's next. So for me, now, I don't know if we're having some technical difficulties, but I can't hear you. No, I can read your lips though.
I accidentally muted myself. I'm really not.
Oh, okay. There you go. Okay. There you go.
I don't know. But
There you
okay,
go.
thanks for letting me know. Yes, but how did you know you weren't ready?
I mean, a lot of the kids, because I went to a PWI, predominantly white, high school out in the valley. A lot of those kids, they had parents who kind of knew how to get on board their kids into college, right? So for me, it was, I didn't have that coaching. I had a village, but the village was not like, okay, what's next for you, James? Or they called me Jimmy. Jimmy, what's next for you? I didn't have a plan. So my goal was to go to El Camino College, go to community college, and kind of figure it out. But I did know that I wanted to have something to do in photojournalism. Okay. So started taking classes there. I ran track there my first year. But then I got a job.
So that's an
uh,
interesting part that you brought up because you're saying you didn't have like really good skills to become like a professional athlete, but you even community college you were able to still run track, which was I'm sure helpful in keeping you involved with the college life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because you still have to learn discipline. There's a lot of things that you can learn, by being on a sports team. Discipline. Being on time when you're asked to. Just developing a good work ethic. And so, you kind of get those things in a different manner than saying, going to 2,000 miles away or just across town if we're going to a crosstown university, because you got to figure out, you got to wake yourself up. You're
Yes.
responsible for yourself. Not to say that I wasn't responsible, but I just didn't have anyone who kind of had me going down the right path, right? I didn't take an ACT, didn't take an SAT, had no clue what it was.
Okay.
And I was so naive, I didn't even ask. It was like, what? Y'all taking a who? Oh, okay. All right. Peace, do your thing. I had no clue, which is
Right.
why
Interesting.
I figured the community college would be a great way for me to kind of, have a good understanding, develop some skills, and then, just kind of use that. And, that's what I did. So eventually I got the AA degree by attending, El Camino College, matriculated over to Long Beach State. Again, I'm working, so I'm putting myself through school at this point. Mom is not paying for me. Mom has moved across country, taking care
Mm,
of her parents with
okay.
Alzheimer's. So, it was incumbent upon me to, figure it out. I couldn't call her, hey mom, hey mom, nah, mom, she taking care of, elderly parents of her. So, 3,000 miles across the way. So I had to figure it out and I did, but it took some time, but I eventually, it was through trial and error.
Okay. So you said it took you some time. So how long were you in the community college?
So let's see. I graduated in 86 from high school.
Hmm.
And I think I finally graduated from Elko in 91, I want to say.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I was putting myself through college. And so I was
Hmm.
working. I got a job with the county, working at a local hospital. And so, working, going to school, sometimes being on academic probation.
Yeah.
Uh, it's like, okay, bro, you got to get this thing together. Right.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
figured it out. And so
Okay.
we walked, we celebrated. Okay, what's next? Right. So we did the thing in Long Beach, got into Long Beach. They had a wonderful photojournalism program. And the only thing about it is you have to be a part of the campus life to really be a participant in photojournalism.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Kelly, the professor there, who was, you know, who was known, world renowned photographer, photojournalist, I again, because I'm putting myself through school, I didn't have the time. This is like a regular 9 to 5 where I couldn't just like, all right,
Okay.
I'm not coming in today.
Right.
So
Right.
again, I had to figure out what was next for me. And
Okay.
so you talked about education. I figured, I could take some Black Studies courses, kind of get in tune to who I am and, what kind of impact I can make in my community. And through that, I figured, okay, after graduating, maybe because I had such wonderful teachers in the Black Studies department, maybe I can be a strong African American male teacher in some of our, in the school system. And so I kind of matriculated, I shifted because I couldn't do photojournalism the way I wanted to.
Okay.
Um, and so I matriculated and just thought about being a teacher. And so went back to school after I graduated at Long Beach in 98, class of 98, and, started the path to become a teacher, which again, going back to your very first question, when did you become, a learner? For me, young adult, definitely. And then, moved on to developing a passion for teaching kids, especially kids in our community.
Okay.
So that's a long story, but that's my story.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break for our sponsor, and then we're going to get into what you're doing in education now.
Absolutely.
All over the United States, 75% of children don't know how to write well. Add that to the fact that so many people out there are trying to silence the voices of those who have been oppressed and trying to prevent them from telling their story. Who's going to tell your story? If your child doesn't know how to write well, I have 2 books to address this issue: The Rewrite Method and the Rewrite Method Workbook, written to make sure that parents know what to do, that educators know what to do to get their children to write better, and just not write better, but love to write. Make sure that your next generation could tell their story and they won't be silenced. Go to fallingforlearning.com today to purchase your set. Okay. All right, so we're back. We were hearing about, your journey to become an educator, and you now are taking us to the part where you are an educator. Tell us how long you've been teaching and what your current role is.
So I have been teaching since 1998. So what's that, about 24 years, 25 years maybe?
26, almost 27.
Okay, see, there you go. 26. I know it's somewhere over there. I lose track. 26 years. So primarily working in the South LA area. Started out as, and maybe you can identify with this, or maybe some of your listeners can, especially if they're teachers, they can identify with the emergency permit or emergency credential, or, so I did that series of tests you gotta pass within 5 years. So because I was putting myself through school, by this time I was newly married. I was married in 97, started working in 98, the summer of 98, at one of those schools where you had year-round schools, right? You remember year-round schools?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I started there year-round, and just going through, trying to understand what a teacher looks like, should be teaching and everything. So it was definitely different, but I liked it. I think I made an impact on the students who sat in my class. Again, back then I had about anywhere from 28 to 32 kids in the classroom. I primarily taught my first year, I taught 4th grade.
Okay.
And the second year I taught 5th grade. And I think for the following 4 years, I think I taught, or it kind of went back and forth depending on, the matrix. If you know what the matrix is, that's the time when in the spring, teachers
hold
would.
on 1 second, because I want to make sure people have context. Yeah. So
Okay, go ahead.
So during the time that he's referring to, there was like a teacher shortage. There's often a teacher shortage, but
Always.
the teacher shortage was so bad when Mr. Riley began, that basically as long as you had a bachelor's degree, you could become a teacher. And that's what he means by emergency credential. So they let him teach as long as he did a couple of things, just a few things to be eligible to be emergency credential. Basically, you are also saying that you're going to work towards getting your credential during that time. So he was teaching without any experience as a teacher, just a desire. And there was
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's where he was coming in. And then with elementary, so if you're not clear about that, in elementary, basically everyone has the same credential, right? So kindergarten through 5th grade teachers, you could get pushed, matrix, or according to seniority, you could get pushed from one grade level to the next, anywhere from kindergarten to 5th grade. Of course, there's some variations if they're special day class teachers, but if you're K through 5 regular teacher, you can be moved anywhere between kindergarten through 5th grade. So everyone's kind of like, in a way, competing. They all have the same credential. So just some background. Go ahead.
Well said. Well said. So imagine this. You're working, 7:30 to 3, and then I'm heading back out to Long Beach State. I'm heading back out because they have a teacher program. So with the emergency credential, they say, hey, you know what? You can work as long as you're working towards your credential. You got 5 years. You got 5 years to get your credential. So back to Long Beach, I think their program was maybe 2.5 years, or just whenever you complete it, just as long as you can complete it, because sometimes life does happen,
Mm-hmm.
and things get in the way. But luckily for me, I had another friend, my wife's best friend. Uh, she, basically we went out there at the same time. So we would roll out to Long Beach. Sometimes I would drive, sometimes she would drive. We enrolled in the same classes, and we actually, got our teaching credential together. So that was cool. Um, so yeah, mostly upper grade. And then after the 5 years, I moved over to an independent charter school.
Okay.
And so, which was like the cutting edge. So here in LA, there was a program, or there's a program called Academic English Mastery Program,
Yes.
or commonly known as AMP. So a few of the, uh, basically there was a charter school centered around using the pedagogy that AMP used or was using, trying to teach in the different schools. Well,
Yeah.
some of the administrators of this charter school kind of came out of that office at LAUSD, put a charter together. And so we began, I was one of the founding teachers of the Culture and Language Academy for Success, or we called it short CLAS, CLAS,
Mm-hmm.
Culture and Language Academy for Success. So I worked over there for a while. Worked as the fourth grade teacher because I love technology. They needed a technology person. Worked in
Mm-hmm.
technology for a number of years. And then afterwards, it was like, you know what? This is great. Maybe I need to go back to the district. And so went back to the district. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me back up. During that same time, I was also working on my master's degree in educational technology because this school was developed basically on Apple's one-to-one device to student ratio. So each student had their own laptop. Now this is before,
Okay. Ahead of its
this is
time.
this is
Yeah.
way ahead of this time. So each kid had their own laptop. Each teacher in the classroom had their own Promethean board. Each
Ooh.
teacher had their own projector. Each teacher had their own, a bundle of camera and digital tools that they can use in the classroom.
Wow.
So, so
This is
yeah,
like
so
early 2000s, kind of,
this
right?
was 2000 2003.
Okay. Yeah. So
So I
very,
left
very early.
LAUSD.
Cutting edge. Yes.
Yes, cutting edge. Went over to class, was a founding teacher, worked there for a number of years, and then ultimately came back to the district. Um, and one of the reasons I worked on my master's degree was because they were doing some cutting edge stuff as it relates to technology.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, one of the big things back then was like being able to use Power School to record attendance. Right now, we do it like we use mices, right?
You're before the paper pencil. So this is a little bit before that. Yeah. So that was very cutting
So it
edge
was
back then.
very interesting. And so going through all these different pathways and avenues, with teaching students from fourth to fifth grade, beginning my teaching career, um, in LAUSD, teaching at class, being a founding teacher, being a technology advocate, and then, just, matriculating back over to the district. I found myself in different spaces, different areas. I mean, I've taught everything from kinder to eighth grade because class went up to eighth grade
Mm-hmm.
eventually. So it did start out as a K-5, and then eventually it expanded to middle school.
Yeah.
So I've taught everything from kinder to eighth, either self-contained classroom or as a technology advocate, or what they called us at class student advocate, which is basically a different name for just a teacher, right?
Okay.
So we're doing some cutting edge stuff. So I've been in a lot of places. I've done some long-term sub assignments because I could tell you, 2009, what happened.
There's a lot of a lot of layoffs and everything. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so I was victim of the
Okay.
layoff because I was newly back to the district. And so I had
Yeah.
to, again, Mr. Riley had to figure it out. But
Okay.
but through all that, I still did not leave my passion for learning. And so I think that's kind of what the focus of your podcast
Yeah.
is.
And then thinking
You know,
about like how we could support parents. And one aspect of your current job is your what's your official title right now? Restorative.
so yeah. So before I talk about the restorative justice teacher for the now going back to 2009. So a couple of years after that, um, one of the teachers was unable to fulfill her job duties at a school. So I had a long term sub assignment in this class, and then one of the coaches like, "Hey, maybe you should be. You're pretty good. You're pretty patient with these little kids." And now, mind you, these were, and I had never had experience working with special education students who
Mm-hmm.
were preschool. So they were between the ages of 3 and 5. They
Okay.
were on the autism spectrum. So for me, very first time, it was about 7 kids. I had a couple of adults in the classroom. And the good thing about this class is they went home at 11:30, right? So,
Mm.
or 11:30, 12, but they weren't there a full day, right? So, the coach came in, "Hey, you should be good for this." Okay, great. So then I had to go and get a special education degree for early childhood special education. So for the previous 10 years, that's what I was doing, working in a preschool comprehensive classroom with students with autism between the ages of 3 and 5. So even though I was working at our current school, I found myself disconnected a little bit because a lot of the things that I did in my classroom, um, a lot of the things we would do in staff meetings and, it just, or professional developments, it just didn't apply to me
Yeah.
because, I'm 3 to 5, ages 3 to 5 on the autism spectrum, preschool kids, right?
Yes. So, your current role now,
I got
you're
you.
being a restorative justice teacher,
Absolutely.
and what kind of ideas or strategies can you talk to? Like, well, first of all, tell us what it is, and then we
Yes,
can talk about how people could apply that either with what they do at home with their kids, or as they are just guiding their kids as well, as they go
absolutely.
to school.
So this year, we had a vacancy at our school, and, they closed my classroom down. So the classroom program where I taught, it doesn't exist anymore at my school site. So for
Oh, I
me,
see.
yeah. So for me, I had to figure out either apply to another, school, go to another school, or because if this position is available, why don't I see if I can, fulfill it? So we interviewed with the principal. He was like, "Hey, you got it. I want you." I'm like, "Cool. I want to stay here as well." So now I'm currently serving as the BSAP restorative justice teacher at my school site. And I'll go ahead and provide context for you. BSAP stands for the Black Student Achievement Plan, where within, I think, our last contract renewal with the district, there was a clause written in for teachers or for schools or for the school district to supply BSAP funded personnel at each of our schools. So the BSAP team in my school, we have myself, a restorative justice teacher. There's a PSW, psychiatric social worker for students. We have a PSA who really focuses in on attendance. We have a parent rep, and then we have a school climate advocate, which they kind of do fun things with the students, during recess and lunch, and kind of makes it those kind of times a little bit more engaging, right? Give them
Okay.
opportunities for a little bit more um, um, activity together, closeness. And so that's kind of, I'm a part of that BSAP team. So being a BSAP RJ teacher, one of the things, and I'm green to this position. I
So
am very new.
RJ meaning restorative justice. Okay.
Yes,
So tell us
restorative
about
justice.
that
Thank
concept
you.
of restorative justice.
So basically, it is if you have someone who has caused harm to somebody, maybe an argument, or sometimes, might be a physical altercation or something. And these occur at all levels: elementary, middle, and high school. So you should
Okay.
have these BSAP programs throughout several schools. Not all schools have the BSAP program. There's a certain designation that schools have to fall under in order to get BSAP funding. But being a restorative justice teacher, we try to help the kids, help the students understand there's other ways of dealing with the situation besides just fighting, arguing, calling each other names. And so one of the things that I do, which is part of the positive behavior intervention and support team, one of the things that I do is I hold community circles in my classroom. Now, a community circle is just a time where classes can come together and we can talk about different issues. So we talked this past week, we talked about our culture, holidays, things that we do with our families. Now, and those are good things.
Right.
But the restorative justice piece comes in where, so it's kind of difficult for me just to talk to students if I don't know them. But by building community, having conversations about some of the things that they like to engage in outside of school or in school, it makes it a little bit more easier for me to talk to students if they, if they're referred to me or if I observe something or if
when
a teacher says,
trouble, basically.
Yeah, when they get in trouble, it makes it much easier for me to kind of talk and de-escalate the situation. And so I love the community circles because that's kind of like the entryway, the gateway for me to understand who the children are who come into my community circle classroom, right?
So
And then,
hold on. So you're saying when they get in trouble, they can come to you, but also you help build community. So what about like a dean or like going to the principal's office when they get in trouble?
So yeah, absolutely. That's still in place. So not everything that students do in the classroom, they don't have to be automatically sent to the principal, right? So we're talking about there's tiers, there's levels to behaviors in our schools. So there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 3 is the highest, tier 1 is the lowest.
When do they come to you? Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3?
I got you.
All of them are.
So usually if we're teetering around high tier 1 or tier 2, right? Now, if we, just to give context again, if it's an all, battle fist fight, that's going to go all the way. That's a tier 3 kind of situation. So, principal might just hop into that right now.
Right.
I might do some, have a restorative practice where we can kind of talk about it afterwards. But from the get-go, it's going to go to the principal. If the principal can handle it, great. If he can't handle it, or, maybe there's a referral that I need to kind of talk and, help the students work their way through it, then that's where I come in. But we're talking about, maybe students arguing. So case in point, I'll give you an example. This was a tier 3 behavior. However, it's probably the classic example from this semester. I was asked to see 2 students by a teacher. She's like, hey, these students are not kind of getting along. And so maybe later on that day, they weren't getting along so well that they were pinching and stabbing each other with a pencil. 5th grade.
Each other with a pencil? Oh, no.
Yes. Now, instead of using their words, saying, hey, can you not stab me? Or, hey, can you not pinch me? They were continuously doing that and not even telling the teacher what was going on. Okay. So one of the coordinators got wind of it and, they asked if I can handle it. And I said, sure. Or maybe, maybe she was handling it. And then, she was like, hey, Mr. Riley, can you handle it? I was like, sure. So I jumped in and we kind of talked about it and kind of figured it out. Now, parents were still called, not by me, but because of, the stabbing and the pinching, there was some, some things, some paperwork, some additional paperwork that I don't have to fill out.
Okay.
Right.
So you basically are helping kids to really talk through their emotions, negative,
absolutely,
positive,
and that's what happened,
and resolve conflict in a way.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So this is this is part of a substitute for like when students, instead of like suspending students, or how does
absolutely
that fall into it? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. It's an alternative because, years ago we would just say, okay, you're gone for 2 days or you're gone for 3 days. Well, I mean, going back to that situation, now those 2 students, just about every time I see them, they're almost together. they're friends, they're happy, they're smiling. And I think it had a lot to do with, the restorative practice that we kind of put in place, having the girls talk to each other about what they experienced, and just instead of just, coping with it and dealing with it, hey, why don't you express to the other person how you're feeling and how it makes them feel? And let's talk about this thing instead of continuously, harming each other. We're trying to restore so that we can, get along and be in a safe place, because schools should be the safest place that students can come to. So that's kind of what I do. If it's a tier 3 where, folks are kicking, screaming, punching, it might be all the way, it might escalate to the principal. But if it's something where I can intervene and I can talk and, have a situation where we can share, boys, girls can share, then that's fine as well. So that's kind of part of what I do, being a BSAP restorative justice teacher at my school site.
Okay. And so as you're thinking about your role, like how could parents like follow up and use these types of practices at home with their kids? Because obviously at home they're not suspending their kids, So what are some elements from what you do that can be used at home to help kids in their development and getting
Absolutely.
along with each other?
So one of the things that I do within my community building circles is I have students breathe, and so the breathing, and I always tell them, as we're going through my community circles, I always tell them, if you feel anxious or you feel bothered or, frustrated or angry, take some time to breathe. Try to de-escalate the situation yourself instead of just going all in. Make sure you can calm yourself down, right? And then if you can calm yourself down, then maybe some of the negative behaviors that might come up, let's say siblings are hitting each other, right? And even parents can practice this. They can practice this with their kids. Let's take some time to breathe, calm down. You know, um, you know, Twins might be, busy hitting and kicking each other, and they might be trying to tell their mom or dad or grandma what's going on. Like, hold on, we need to just breathe. you know, we need to calm down, and we need to get all sides of the story. Okay, Johnny, tell me what happened. Is this what happened, Billy? Okay, now, what could have been done to not be in this situation? Asking those kind of restoring questions, or instead of, hey, you better, you know how black parents can be, or you know how parents can be, but you know how black parents can
Yes,
be. Boy,
yes.
you better sit yourself. We'll get right into it. But no, that's an opportunity for parents as well to kind of practice some patience, kind of breathe, figure it out. And even if you have to separate, kids who are acting crazy or off the wall, separate them, instruct them to kind of calm down, do some breathing. There's tons of breathing methods to kind of calm you down, de-stress, de-escalate. And then once the de-escalation has happened, maybe we can have a restorative conversation to kind of help build each other up, instead of just saying, boy, you better go to that corner before I get my.
So there's some ways to deal with it in a more productive way. And then also
Absolutely.
it sounds like some practice for healing or like trying to mend the relationship afterward. I think.
Yes. Yes. Because you want to make sure that some kind of mending is taking place. Now, I've had a situation again where, uh, uh, two girls were in the PS, the school-based PSA. She was in there. We're talking to two girls, and they were, going back and forth. And, off the bat, the girl's like, I don't want to be her friend.
Sorry, hold on. What is a PSA?
A PSA is just pupil service. I'm not too sure what the A
An
is. I want to say
attendant.
attendant. So basically, they help take care and monitor attendance at schools.
Okay.
So we were there because, I'm talking to two girls. I want to make sure I have somebody else in the room with me. And I think she, brought the two girls in to me so we could kind of deal with the situation together. So at the beginning of the conversation, one girl was like, I don't want to be your friend. But by de-escalating, talking about what happened, the needle had moved near the end of our conversation to say, she said, I don't mind being her friend.
Okay.
So you kind of take what you can get. And so going from, I don't want to be your friend, to I don't mind. I think that's a win situation.
Yeah, for sure. Because
And so again,
people
just
hold
talking.
grudges. They do. Kids can
Absolutely.
hold grudges, and
Absolutely.
like you said, if they get suspended, that doesn't mean that when we come back to school that we're not still going to have more conflicts because we just got in trouble, but that didn't solve what happened between
It
us.
did. Absolutely. I mean, the problem is still there. And when was the time that they had an opportunity to talk to one another if they're suspended?
Yeah.
So suspension shouldn't be the first thing that we jump to. We're trying to repair because ultimately they're going to have to see each other, especially if they're in the same classroom.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to get along and figure it out. And so part of my job is to help them come to an understanding where if something happened, let's acknowledge what happened. How does each of the parties feel about it? And what can we do? What can we put in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again?
That's good. We're going to end here. We really appreciate you coming and talking to us about all the things, like your journey through education. And obviously, parents and caregivers can take some tips from that. Sometimes kids aren't ready to go to community college right away, not community college, but to the 4-year university. That doesn't mean that they're not going to get to getting that 4-year degree later on and having a really wonderful career. But also like things that can be done ahead of time to help them think about the SAT, prompt them for certain things, and then just how the career unfolds in different ways, right? You want to be an athlete, you have to figure out like, okay, I don't have the skills, what can I do that's close to it? And then ending up um, going into teaching because you had an alternative path to from journalism through your working and family man, got married and all of that. So it was great to hear from you and to share your information. Can you tell us about what you have going on? Because you have like a show as well, right? And where can people watch your show and learn more about you and the services you offer?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to come on and rant and kind of share my story, my unconventional story. I'm not too sure if I met the mark in terms of what you wanted, but hopefully your listeners and viewers will find some value in what we discussed today, kind of listening to me and sharing my story. So I am I'm, I'm a baby YouTuber, I guess. So people can find me.
A baby YouTuber?
No,
Okay. I
I
mean,
have a
call
couple of
yourself what
channels.
you want. Go for it.
Yeah. Only reason I say, because again, family time, I have to fit in where I can get in. And so, I have a couple of different ways that I'm on YouTube. And so one of the ways my release, my give back to the community is I am a football high school commentator for my sons. All three of my sons, they attended a charter school out here and they play football. And so every Friday night, football season is over for high school. You can find me at This Week in Pally Football on YouTube, and you can go check me out and have interviews with some of my son's former colleagues and current players on the football team.
Wait,
But
what's your name of your podcast? I mean, of your show? What's the name of your
yes,
YouTube channel? Please
this
tell us.
absolutely This Week in Pally Football is one.
Okay, this week in Pally
This
Football.
Week in Pally Football is one. But my main channel, if you type in on YouTube, Mr. Riley's World, you will see a plethora of stuff. You'll see a plethora of things. You'll see me reading stories. You'll see me talking about my families. You'll see me unboxing some stuff, especially during COVID, which is when I had a lot of time to upload a lot of videos. And so, I love technology. I love computing. And so you'll see videos about some of those things as well. So yeah, if you're looking, you can look over to Mr. Riley's World on YouTube, and we'll just leave with that one because I have tons of social media platforms, but we'll just leave you with those two: This Week in Pally Football and Mr. Riley's World.
All right. Thanks again for joining us. And thank you for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. Again, please do something today that your future adult kids will thank you for. All right. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again for supporting the Falling for Learning podcast. New episodes go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. You can watch us on youtube.com at Falling for Learning or listen on all major podcast platforms such as Apple, Google, Audible, Spotify, and much more. For more resources, visit fallinginlovewithlearning.com. We really appreciate you. Have a wonderful week.